Have you ever paused to consider that the stories we tell ourselves and each other aren't just fleeting thoughts or casual anecdotes? What if they are, in fact, incredibly intricate mental structures that actively sculpt our perception of reality, shaping our very actions and relationships? We often hear the narratives define us, but, well, what does that truly mean when we look beneath the surface? Today, we're embarking on a fascinating journey into the internal architecture of these powerful structures. Our deep dive is into episode 12 of a groundbreaking theoretical framework rooted in Jalan Simunovic's Cognosystemic theory of human psychosocial relational construction, which we'll just call TCCR for short. Think of it as a kind of comprehensive blueprint for understanding how our internal stories shape everything about our experience.
Exactly. And our mission in this deep dive is really to analytically deconstruct the narrative, moving beyond its often abstract perception. We want to reveal it as a functional unit within what's called the Cognosystem. We'll show you precisely how narratives are complex internal structures with identifiable components that can be analyzed, understood, and crucially, even intervened upon. And this isn't just academic. This perspective is particularly vital for professionals, especially those in social work, as it equips them with systematic tools for narrative analysis. But honestly, it's equally insightful for anyone seeking to understand their own inner world.
So here's where it gets truly thought-provoking, considering narratives not merely as something you tell, but as something you construct internally, piece by intricate piece, with discernible parts. Let's begin to unpack this remarkable idea.
Okay, so in the TCCR, a narrative isn't just a string of words. It's conceived as an ecological cognosystemic structure. Imagine a miniature ecosystem within your mind. All its elements are interconnected and work together, in concert to generate meaning. It's a living, dynamic system where everything influences everything else.
A mental ecosystem. I like that framing.
And the primary function of these structures is profound. They actively organize reality. They allow individuals to interpret, categorize, recall, and ultimately act upon their psychosocial experiences. So they're not passive mirrors reflecting the world. They are active builders of our lived experience, continuously molding how we perceive and engage with our environment and each other.
That's a significant shift, isn't it? It moves us from merely storytelling to something far more fundamental. Structuring. When we consider this, what does it imply for how we perceive our own constant internal dialogue, those private stories we tell ourselves every day, and even the larger societal narratives that surround us? It suggests a profound level of agency, or perhaps lack thereof, in shaping our inner and outer worlds.
It absolutely does. And to truly grasp that, we need to look at the very building blocks. The TCCR identifies 8 precise components that form the foundational structure of these cognosystemic narrative systems. Understanding these components allows for a far more systematic and, impactful analysis.
8 components. Okay. So what are these core elements that construct our inner narratives?
Let's delve into them. The first is experience. This is the initial input, the raw material upon which all narratives are built. It's simply what happened, the events, the observations, the raw data of existence. For instance, receiving a critical review at work, that's an experience.
Just the event itself, okay.
Closely following are perceptions and emotions. These are the immediate subjective interpretations and feelings associated with that experience. They act as essential mediators, kind of coloring that initial input. So that critical work review might evoke feelings of disappointment, anger, or even a sense of challenge. And your perception might frame it as unfair or maybe as a learning opportunity. This isn't just what happened, but how it felt and appeared to you.
That immediately makes it so personal, doesn't it? Our perceptions and emotions are the unique filters we apply. But then there's a wider lens, which you mentioned is context.
Precisely. Context is the third component, and it's the frame of reference in which the experience takes place. This includes cultural, social, familial, sociopolitical, and educational dimensions. All of it. Think about that critical work review again. If you grew up in a culture that values stoicism and self-reliance, your narrative about handling that critique might emphasize The fourth component is propositional content, often referred to as the narrative core. This is the semantic interpretation where the raw experience combines with your perceptions and emotions. It's the central idea, the core statement, or the fundamental meaning you extract from it all. For example, the experience of a new business venture failing might, through perceptions of inadequacy and a context of high societal pressure for success, lead to the narrative core. I am not capable of running a successful business. Alternatively, with different perceptions and context, the core could be failure is a necessary step on the path to innovation. It's really the what of the story.
Right. The central thesis statement almost. And once we have that central idea, how do we, solidify it, make it feel true?
That leads us to the fifth element, cognitive evaluation, or the narrative body. This is where that semantic core is supported and justified. It's the argumentation, the values, and the assumptions, whether implicit or explicit, that bolster the core proposition. It's the why and how of the story. For instance, if your narrative core is, I am not capable of running a successful business, the cognitive evaluation might include arguments like, I didn't have enough capital, or I made too many mistakes, supported by underlying assumptions like successful people never fail, or you need a specific background to succeed. Conversely, for the failure as a step to innovation narrative, the cognitive evaluation would draw on ideas like learning requires experimentation, or resilience is built through setbacks, you see.
That's incredibly insightful. So it's not just the core idea, but all the internal scaffolding we build around it to make it true for us. What about how strongly we believe these stories? Does that factor in?
Absolutely. That's the sixth component, epistemic attitude. This describes the degree of certainty, confidence, and conviction you hold towards a particular narrative. This can range from a very high epistemic attitude, a firm, unyielding belief, like someone who believes justice always prevails, despite clear evidence of systemic injustices, to a low attitude characterized by continuous doubt, skepticism, and openness to revision. This attitude is crucial because it indicates a narrative's resilience, its adaptability, and how easily it might be challenged or transformed.
It sounds like the epistemic attitude determines how sticky a narrative is in our minds, how resistant to change it might be. Then there's the why behind the story, the narrative purpose.
Indeed. Narrative purpose, the seventh component, is the underlying intention that guides and coheres the narrative, orienting its psychosocial meaning. It's what generates motivation and gives the story its direction, its driving force. Consider a student whose core narrative is, education is the key to changing my destiny. The purpose here is likely self-improvement and upward mobility, which fuels their persistence through academic and economic challenges. It's the guiding force, the ultimate why bother, if you will.
The engine driving the story forward.
Okay.
And the last one.
And finally, the eighth component is narrative function. This refers to the actual role the narrative plays within the Cognosystem and in real life, translating those abstract ideas into concrete actions. It's the transformative agent, the what it does. For example, an entrepreneur holding the narrative, every obstacle is an opportunity to innovate, might, when faced with a setback, not only maintain motivation, but actively reframe that failure as a necessary stepping stone, leading to new solutions and reduced anxiety. This component highlights the pragmatic impact of our internal stories on our behavior and well-being.
So we've dissected the anatomy of a narrative into these 8 distinct parts: experience, perceptions, emotions, context, propositional content, cognitive evaluation, epistemic attitude, purpose, and function. But just like a living organism, these aren't static components sitting in a list. They're constantly in motion, influencing each other in surprising ways, aren't they? It's not a static checklist at all. It's more like a living, breathing system where each part influences the others in a continuous cycle.
Precisely. That's a perfect way to put it. These 8 elements do not operate in isolation. They are in a dynamic interplay with continuous internal feedback loops. For instance, an ethical judgment embedded within a cognitive evaluation could intensify an emotional evaluation, which in turn strongly reinforces a specific behavioral imperative derived from the narrative's purpose. Or a new experience might challenge an epistemic attitude, forcing a reevaluation of the propositional content. The entire narrative functions as a system within itself, constantly adjusting and recalibrating.
That interconnectedness makes you wonder, though, if a narrative is truly a living system, does it also have moments of, stagnation or resistance to change? And what about the scale of these narratives? Are some more powerful or foundational than others within an individual's or even society's cognosystem?
That's an excellent question, and it brings us directly to the concept of narrative stratification. Within a cognosystem, some narratives are central. These have a structuring, often quite rigid and widely distributed role. They profoundly influence identity and behavior. Think of these as the bedrock beliefs, the core operating system, perhaps. Others are peripheral, playing a more flexible or transitory role. Maybe situation-specific stories or less deeply held beliefs. This hierarchy reflects different types of narratives, from subjugated stories of oppression to challenging ones, emerging dominant ones, and eventually hegemonic ones.
Hegemonic narratives. Those sound particularly influential.
They are. Hegemonic narratives, for instance, achieve their status by being widely accepted as unquestionable truths within a society. They profoundly influence public policy and education, often without us even consciously noticing their effect. A paradigmatic example is the narrative of meritocracy, which posits that success is solely the result of individual effort and talent. Now, this narrative, while seemingly positive on the surface, often shapes public policy and can inadvertently legitimize socioeconomic inequalities by overlooking systemic barriers and contextual factors we just discussed.
That's a powerful one, isn't it? And it makes you wonder, how many of us unconsciously adopt these unquestionable truths and then struggle when our personal experience doesn't neatly align with that widely accepted story? It really highlights where power dynamics come into play within these narrative structures, both personally and societally.
Indeed. And connecting this further, each narrative component, the experience, the evaluation, the purpose, etc., may contain or be composed of specific cognosystemic memes. Now, these memes aren't just cultural ideas floating around vaguely, like the internet definition. In TCCR, they are defined much more specifically. They are specific narrative systems intentionally designed to transmit, replicate, or transform the narrative across different levels of the Cognosystem. They are, in essence, units of cultural information embedded within narratives that actively compete for space and influence in human minds.
Okay, so if these memes are like genetic codes within narratives, it almost suggests that stories themselves have a kind of survival instinct, replicating through our minds and cultures. Picture a catchy jingle that gets stuck in your head, but for deep-seated belief systems designed to stick, spread, and influence behavior. That's a truly mind-bending way to think about how cultural ideas, beliefs, and even biases perpetuate and evolve.
Exactly. It adds another layer of complexity and intentionality to how narratives spread and shape us. And the implications of this entire structural understanding, the components, the interactions, the stratification, the memes are profound, especially for professional practices like social work. Recognizing this internal architecture of a narrative is absolutely vital. It enables a far more targeted and ultimately effective approach to intervention.
How so, specifically? What does it allow a practitioner to do differently?
Well, specifically, it allows professionals to deeply understand conflicts of meaning in individuals, families, or communities. They can get to the true root of distress or dysfunction, not just the surface story. It also helps them identify critical points for intervention, pinpointing which specific components might be most amenable to change. Perhaps it's an oppressive behavioral mandate embedded in the cognitive evaluation, or limiting ethical judgment, or maybe a rigid epistemic attitude that needs softening. Ultimately, this knowledge empowers practitioners to design what the theory calls narrative resignification strategies. This enables the co-creation of new meanings, new behaviors, or healthier relational configurations, effectively transforming dysfunctional stories into adaptive and empowering ones.
So this means instead of just hearing a story from someone, a social work professional, or really even someone trying to understand a personal struggle, can actually see the blueprint. They can potentially identify the faulty wiring, the weak connections, the unhelpful assumptions, and help rebuild it for a more positive outcome. It feels like a huge leap from traditional, perhaps less systematic approaches. It gives them a tangible framework to intervene and foster positive change in complex human realities.
It really does. It moves narrative work from an art form alone to, well, an art and a science. At its core, the takeaway is this. A narrative is far, far more than simply what someone tells. It is a complex, dynamic structure that actively organizes our lived world, providing coherence, meaning, and a fundamental framework for action.
And because of that deep function, rigorous analysis of these internal structures isn't merely an academic exercise, is it? It's crucial for any professional practice aiming to be critical, transformative, and scientifically grounded, particularly in fields like social work, where reshaping human psychosocial relational construction is, well, the core mission. But more broadly, it seems essential for anyone seeking deeper self-understanding or a clearer view of societal dynamics.
I couldn't agree more.
So, as you go about your day, maybe take a moment to consider the narratives shaping your own life and the world around you. Are they liberating you, or are they subtly limiting your potential? And just think, what small, intentional shift in just one component of a narrative, maybe questioning an underlying assumption, or revisiting the emotions tied to an experience, what small shift could fundamentally change your entire story, or even contribute to changing a collective one?